gonna do roll call?
Yes.
Okay. Juanita Collins,
Present.
Mark Elias, Lydia Gregg, Jeff Hurt.
Here.
Kira Leonard.
Here.
Laquita McGill, Teresa McMillan Ward, Suzanne Odena,
Here.
Wallace Lowry, Commissioner Danette Henry, Commissioner Juanita May. You have a quorum.
First.
Well, I would like to start with a welcome.
Yes. Welcome everybody
I'd
back.
like to welcome everybody back to this year, 2023 AHAC meeting. We're getting started a little late. We missed a meeting prior due to training that Yolanda and I had to attend. But I'm happy that you all were willing to come back to serve another 2 years with us to move forward with these recommendations. What I have today, let me introduce to you all again, Miss Yolanda Presley. She's my boss, and she's going to be the one that's going to be carrying on from here with the AHAC meetings going forward. So what we have right now, before we get into the PowerPoint, is the approval of the agenda.
I will move that we approve the agenda.
Madam Chair, Juanita Collins, I second. Those in favor?
Sorry, if I interrupt you.
No.
Okay, we're with the Daytona Beach Board of Realtors. We're working on our home certification. I want to sit in on your meeting. Do you have a certain place for that?
Yes, I think so. You're right.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the disruption.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion passed. Our first action is introductions of the AHEC members for 2023 to 2025. Jeff, would you like to start off?
Jeff Hurt.
Juanita Collins. Don't say anything about yourself.
Good.
Well, to keep the format, Mark Gellis.
Well, listen, she doesn't know you
All
all,
right.
so it'll be
We'll
nice
start
to
over.
give her some information on you all.
I'm Jeff Hurt, and I've been on the board for a while. Was on the planning board for like 26 years, and I'm a realtor here in Daytona with Remax.
Juanita Collins, my second term on the committee, and I'm a retired educator in Volusia County.
Mark Gellis, this is my second term on the committee. I ran Halifax Urban Ministries for a number of years, helping the poor and homeless, and currently working on tiny homes and other alternative housing opportunities to meet the need.
I'm Carol Leonard. I'm an architect for the Housing Authority of the City of Daytona Beach. She knows that though. I bother her on a weekly basis.
I'm Sue Odena, and I'm a commercial realtor. I've been on the board for several years. Also work in affordable housing, or at least try to. Mr. Oringer, would you like to say anything? No?
No, I'm representing.
Okay. Now, we do have some guests, and they're from the Daytona Board of Realtors, and some of them are here to get credit so that they can get a pin saying that they know what's going on about affordable housing. So if you'd like to stand, that way you'll be in the record.
Hi, my name is Jamal Machuku. I'm with Exit Real Estate Property Solutions here in the Daytona Beach, New Smyrna area. Thank you for allowing me. I am part of the Daytona Beach Board and the law working community, so thank you.
I'm Felicia Noble with Colvinger Coast Realty. I'm also a pretty active member at the Daytona Beach Area Association of Realtors, and I am currently working on a housing opportunity certificate to better suit our community.
Missy?
Hi, these are my students, as you can see. I'm the chairperson of the Housing Opportunities Committee at Daytona Beach Area Association of Realtors. I am Lucy Desmore. I'm also on the Housing Fair Committee that it will take place on Saturday coming. And if they're going to gain their certification that we just started at the Board of Realtors, it is required that they attend one of these meetings. So they are here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
John, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell everybody who you are.
John Nicholson, resident, Daytona Beach Side.
Our next item on the agenda is election of the chair and the vice chair.
Yes.
Entertain.
Yes, we would like to, this only.
Pick up a little bit.
Well, Susan term is up, as you all know, as serving as our chair for the AHAC committee. So it's Lydia, serving as the co-chair. So right now, we would like to see if any of you all would like to resume one of those positions. Or we can move it to when everyone is here at the next AHAC meeting. We can move, because we're missing quite a few. So we can wait until the next meeting convene to vote on that.
Do we need a motion to do that? Do I hear a motion to wait till the
Sure,
next
I'll
meeting?
move that we wait till the next meeting to elect our officers for the year.
Second.
Yes, sir?
Sorry to interrupt, Xavier Campbell, IT. May the record reflect that Commissioner May just logged on.
Oh,
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me online. I appreciate it.
thank you, Juanita. Did you just hear what we've done so far?
Sue, a little louder.
Did you hear what we have accomplished so far?
No, not yet. You guys just started 5 minutes ago, right?
Yes, we introduced each other, so if you'd like to say anything by way of an introduction, you're welcome to. And we voted to move the election of the chair and vice chair to the next meeting so that all of our members will be here.
All right, thank you.
Okay, moving along. Item number 6 is an overview of the AHAC's incentive strategies. And we have an orientation video.
Okay, so what we're gonna do, the first video that we're gonna watch is really just, an overview of the AHAC's responsibilities, roles and responsibilities as it relates to, what we do here at the city of Daytona Beach. Your responsibility is as far as giving recommendations and those type of things. We wanted to make sure that, just sort of give everybody another chance to be able to hear. I know everybody probably already knows, but we want to start this year off with everybody being able to see this video, listen, ask questions if need be. And then after this video, we'll have one other short video that will be on one of our incentive strategies.
Xavier?
Well, good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today for our training, Affordable Housing Advisory Committee Orientation. This is part 1 of a 2-part training. I'm Michael Cheney. I'm a technical advisor with the Florida Housing Coalition, and in a minute I will introduce our other presenters that are joining me today. We're very happy that you're joining us, and there's plenty of you who are joining. We have SHIP administrators and AHAC members. We have elected officials and planners from all over the state, because this is a topic that is of much interest to many communities that are receiving SHIP dollars. And so without further ado, let me go on and get into the content of today's training. We want to thank the Florida Housing Finance Corporation. It is through their Catalyst program, and you see that highlighted here in the purple text on this slide. It's their Catalyst program that's bringing so many good trainings to you, including today's webinar. We have a face-to-face workshop coming up in Pompano Beach coming up here soon, and more workshops and webinars to follow. And just a word about the Florida Housing Coalition, because I know that we have some folks that are joining us for this training. Maybe this is one of the first ones that you've joined us on. We're a statewide nonprofit organization, not to be confused with Florida Housing Finance Corporation. I just mentioned them on the last slide. Florida Housing, as they're called, is your funder for the SHIP program. We at the Florida Housing Coalition are dedicated to helping you with your SHIP dollars and or other affordable housing dollars. As you see on this slide, we're dedicated to training that helps you to have successful compliance with a variety of affordable housing programs, and to help you design your assistance strategies, your assistance programs, to think about land use planning tools, and also occasionally to do research and data gathering that is of benefit to many of our members. And so, as promised, I get to introduce the rest of the presenters here. It's myself and Tamara West who are first going to be presenting, and both of us are technical advisors here at the Florida Housing Coalition. But really, it's Cody Glazer, our legal director, who is the man of the hour. And I say that because he's going to be almost talking literally for an hour. And after we've introduced you to the advisory committee, we'll be hearing from Cody, as our legal director is most apt to share with you lots of good details about a variety of housing incentive strategies. And so I get the honors of just beginning to introduce you to the advisory committee. This AHAC is the reason why you have an Affordable Housing Advisory Committee is because of the SHIP dollars that your county or city receives. And the main responsibility for you as a committee member, I guess I'm assuming that we have several committee members with us here. The main responsibility that you have is to think about housing incentives. Things that could be done to change the rules for how business is done in your city or county for anything related to land use or housing development. Think about what can be done to improve upon those rules in such a way that it creates an incentive for building affordable housing. And so to that end, you get to think about recommendations for changing or adding to policies and procedures, ordinances, the regulations related to land development. You get to look at your comprehensive plan and at every turn to think about things that you can do to create some incentive for building or repairing affordable housing. And to that end, on this next slide, we see some of the text that's in the SHIP statute related to the AHAC, where the SHIP statute tells you, AHAC, your responsibilities are to make recommendations. You might recommend modifying or maybe even repealing some rule or ordinance or something about the way we do things in the city or the county. You might recommend creating an exception to the way that we do business whenever affordable housing is involved. For example, one of the first incentives that we'll hear about is expedited permitting. That's the idea of expediting affordable housing projects to a greater degree than other projects, expediting any way in which your city or county staff are reviewing them. Maybe there's a request for a permit, anything that can be done to expedite. Well, that's creating an exception for housing in a very good way. And in a similar way, your recommendations might recommend some amendment, some change to the comp plan or other regulations. Hey, I'm about to hush up and hand it off to Tamra. But before I do, let me share this slide with you. You know, folks, there's only really a handful of ways that we can develop affordable housing, that we can make housing more affordable. Let's go through a couple of those variables now, and I promise by the end of this slide, there's a punchline related to the AHAC committee, to your work. One way that we can make housing more affordable is to increase the income of the households needing assistance. Now, I start there because I don't really have very many credible strategies for increasing. I don't have a magic wand to increase the incomes of these households. But you can start to get the idea that with the rest of the options that we put up here, we're going to be tweaking some other variables in this math problem, which is housing affordability. Like, for example, another thing that we can do is we could decrease the interest rate on money that you have to borrow to go and build some affordable housing over there. Oh, now if you had less interest that you had to pay because of a lesser interest rate, now you really are starting to talk about the bottom line dollars and cents of what it costs to build housing. In a similar way, wouldn't it even be greater if you had the option of decreasing the amount of debt that a developer has to go and borrow in order to build that housing over there? Indeed, we do that too, and it is a valuable way that we contribute to making affordable housing happen. And finally, you see the red asterisks on this, we can focus on reducing the costs of building. And don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about, finding the cheapest materials. You build housing with cheap materials, you get cheap housing, and that's not what we're after. But indeed, when we think about housing incentives, we're talking about reforming the regulations that your city or county has that are related to land use or housing development, and there really is something there. These recommendations that your advisory committee it has the potential for making, they truly can help to cut back on some of the costs of development. And this does contribute to the bottom line, helping to make housing more affordable. So there you go. Think as we're going through the rest of our training today, think about that in the back of your mind. A lot of what we're talking about here has the goal of reducing the costs for building or repairing affordable housing. Okay, as we continue to offer you more of an orientation, I hand it off to Tamra West to share with you more about your responsibilities.
So yes, on this, to be brief, because Cody does definitely have a lot of information that he's going to push out. Me and Michael had a presentation a while back. Uh-oh, he's going fast. I can't go that fast. We had a presentation recently, so we're just going to provide you a brief overview in regards to what the AHAC responsibilities are. The whole basis is to plan and review your policies and procedures every year. Unfortunately, that was an update a few years back, so we are going to have to do this on an annual basis, but this is going to give you an opportunity to fine tune the existing things that you have in place and to encourage you to facilitate or produce more things for affordable housing in your communities, to incentivize this for these developers in your communities. You are required to report a minimum of 11 incentives, and that's clearly identified in the rules and regulations. And after you actually get those approved later on in your year, because most people are already starting their cycle, you do have to have that final report approved by your board and during a public hearing.
Oops, hold on.
Okay. So as you are aware, your funds are contingent on having this plan completed. Hopefully you're not an organization that was a part of the holdback, but if you were, we are definitely working with you to get those items resolved, but your funding is contingent upon you submitting this report annually. Okay, I thought it was some more stuff in there. See, Michael helps create some of these, so he has transitions on them, so I'm just like trying to make sure I'm following the transition. I'm sorry. So also right now, we're already in our timeline. Local governments have already started this process. Hopefully you're already in this cycle between the July and August process where you're doing your draft, you're scheduling your public hearings. Normally most people would submit their plans by November because you have to submit it in December to be compliant, right? So I don't want to talk about January and June because we're already past that. And then your cycle starts all over again in March. So this is a continuous thing. I know it's going to be a challenge to do every incentive. So Cody is going to talk about ways to focus on a few key items because some items you're just not going to update every year and it's very taxing. You definitely are going to have your planning staff involved, but this is just a recommended calendar to keep you on track to be prepared every year. Next slide.
Yeah, hey, before we move on, just seeing a couple of comments in the chat here. I have only actually seen two or three messages. Some folks are having difficulty with audio. I guess I'm just mentioning that. I think that we probably don't have everyone having difficulties. We've got over 140 people on here and only a couple of notes on that. So hopefully they will join us again. Thanks. I'm going to go to this next slide.
And then if that's an issue, you might be able to keep this on so you can see the slides, but you may have to dial up on the phone so you can hear the audio. That could be an option for you. Okay, in regards to elected officials, also this is something relatively new. Elected officials are required to be a part of your LHAP and they do count as your regular 8 to 11. The elected officials are very vital because they're involved in the day-to-day operations of your local government. So they can be an advocate for you to help you push your agenda for affordable housing in your community. And this is just a template. This is a standard template that is used. We can forward this out to you. You can use this when you would like. You can follow the exact same format or you can make it slightly different, but you do have to have this content in when you're submitting your report.
Oh, Tamara, I'll also mention this template is an appendix in the AHAC guide, which is one of our handouts here.
Yes, it is. And then I think, is this my slide? I'm sorry. I think it is. I'm sorry. So some of the possible updates to your AHAC, you could either create new incentives, you can make changes to your existing incentives. Sometimes there's not going to be any change to your strategies. You might just say you want to keep it as is. There's no change. Commission does have to, well, they don't have to technically approve your outcomes, but they have to approve your overall plan. So that was my little 5-minute spill, and I'm going to give up as much time to Cody. So next up is Cody Glazier. Yay, Cody. No, just listen.
Thanks, Sarah, for the cheering. Hey, everyone. Cody Glazier, Legal Director, Florida Housing Coalition. Hope you like the sound of my voice because you're going to get a lot of it. I'll be speaking for about an hour today on 5 of the 11 incentives. And the next Friday as well, we'll also be covering the remaining 6. So a lot of discussion about incentives today. And just one quick disclaimer before we start here today is, sometimes when we do these AHAC webinars or, land use planning webinars in general, sometimes we get a comment or two that says, there is just too much information or the speaker went through this information way too quickly. I'll be the first to admit that, yes, this is going to be a lot of information. If we could have like one webinar per each of these incentives, we absolutely would. Unfortunately, we don't have that kind of time. So I'm going to do my best to get through all 11 incentives, basically kind of give you an overview of what each of them are, give some ideas for how the AHAC can approach these incentives. But if you want to like dive more deeply into any of these, that's what we get paid for by the state. So if you have if you're listening to this webinar and you have more questions about one of these incentives, feel free to reach out. I love thinking through these incentives. We all do. So happy to provide any assistance after the fact if the webinar didn't go as deeply as you might have wished. So Mike can go ahead and go to the next slide. And just as Tamara and Michael mentioned before, the main goal of the AHAC is to make this report. But I think in the most ideal world, it's more than just a report. I think the AHAC can really be this, third-party check on how local government is addressing affordable housing in general. And so all 11 of these recommendations, these strategies that I'm going to talk about, have to be considered by the local government, but only 2 are actually required to be implemented by the local government as a condition of receiving CHIP funding. So I'm going to talk about those 2 required strategies today and 3 of the other ones. We're going to first start with those 2 required incentives that each local government has to implement. Just a little bit more about the AHAC. So there are a lot of things that local government cannot control when it comes to affordable housing. Kind of what Michael mentioned before, right? Local government can't, address housing demand. Local government can't really address material costs or labor costs or interest rates, right? But there are a lot of things that local government can control, namely through the zoning and land use policies that the AHAC is required to take a look at. And so I think in its most ideal world, the AHAC is more than just, checking the box to, fill out the report to get your SHIP money. It really can be that third-party independent board that is just checking the government as to how it's approaching its policies. And so this last bullet point here, very important as we get started in all this. All of these incentives that we're going to talk about are extremely localized. And so I wish I could sit up here and say, if you want a density bonus program, you can just do a 20% bonus for developments that provide 10% affordable housing, right? I wish I could do that, but each of these incentives are going to be so localized based on your own housing needs, based on what your existing zoning code already has in place. It depends on your local development patterns. And so today, what I'm going to try to do is just give you some thoughts about how to approach each incentive, rather than give you exact language for what these incentives should say. So that's what I hope to get across today. Each of these will be highly localized. I'll give you some thoughts on how to approach each incentive. And so these are the big 11. These are the infamous 11 incentives that we're going to talk about today and next Friday. I'm not going to read all these off to you because we're going to go through these soon enough. But today I'm going to start with expedited permitting and the housing impact statement requirement, which are the 2 that are actually required for local governments to adopt. The other 9 are optional for local governments to implement. I think all 9 of them should be implemented, so we'll talk about how to do that. But again, these are the 11 incentives for folks who may be new to the AHAC process, just to give you a sense of what we're going to be talking about today and next Friday. And so the AHAC's charge, and so basically today, I'm going to go through each of these 3 items when we talk about each of these incentives. So first, we'll talk about how to review the established policies and procedures, which is a charge of the AHAC. The AHAC has to look at, how are the existing policies currently working? What are those existing policies? So we'll talk about how to give you some ideas about how you can review these incentives. Then the AHAC is required to recommend specific action. So once you've done the review, then you make recommendations to the local government on what to do. And then finally, something that's optional for the AHAC to do is to make an implementation schedule. Quick shout out to Marion County. They have a great AHAC report from last year that'll say things like, by 2023, we want to have a functional ADU ordinance, or by 2024, we want to have a workable density bonus ordinance, right? So we'll talk about the way to review stuff, recommend incentives, and then finally to make a schedule as an optional part of your AHAC reports. So again, these are the strategies I'm going to talk about today. We're going to start with the 2 that are required, expedited permitting and the ongoing process of review. And then finally wrap up today with going over the printed inventory of locally owned lands, fee waivers, and the street requirement strategy. And so for today and for next Friday, I'm going to go through all these 11. These are basically how I'm going to structure this training. So I'm going to give you the statutory language, do some, talk about the purpose of each incentive, give you some best practices, give you some examples from what other jurisdictions are doing across the state. And then at the end of every section, you're going to have a table that kind of looks like this. This is going to be like your Spark Notes version. If you remember nothing else, you can always come back to this slide at the end of every section. From the left side, I'm going to give you some ideas for what to review as part of the AHAC process. So just give you some ideas of, what kind of people you can bring into your AHAC to educate your committee members, what documents to look at as part of the review. And then on the right side of this table, I'm going to give you some specific policy ideas that the AHAC could recommend. So maybe some actionable steps of like, the AHAC could recommend this for expedited permitting or this for the ADU strategy. So that's how that'll be organized today. And then finally, before I'll get into the first strategy of expedited permitting, just want to give some initial tips for a good AHAC. And this will really tie into a lot of what we're going to talk about over the next 2 trainings. And this first bullet point here is, I'm going to come back to this one quite a bit because, the AHAC can be very challenging because essentially we're asking, 8 to 11 volunteers essentially who have other jobs, who may never have looked at a zoning code before, to make tangible and actionable recommendations about zoning. Like, I spend my whole career thinking about zoning and zoning incentives, and this is still a challenge. So we're asking, volunteers maybe once an hour a month to come in here and have both a thorough understanding and be able to make recommendations on these policies. That's a tough task. And so hopefully today I can give you some ideas of how to review, because again, I think in order to make good and effective recommendations to your local government, you have to have an understanding of what's already there. It's very hard to make, a recommendation on a density bonus if you don't already understand how your densities are currently working in your city, what strategies you've already adopted in the past, right? You have to have that basic understanding to make good recommendations. So that's a first good tip, is I think AHACs can spend a bulk of their time just doing the review, doing the understanding, educating their members on what is already in place. I think that'll open up what sort of recommendations the people on the committee are going to want to go forward on. Second bullet point is I think AHACs are only as good as the people on them. So I think it's always good to recruit good volunteers that are going to be at every meeting, who have experience navigating the zoning code in the past, or the comp plan in the past, with a mix of advocates, of course, who are just looking out for the best interest of low-income households. But I think utilizing that development experience is so key, because a lot of these incentives are so focused on planning and zoning, and the topic that is very difficult to just jump into and have recommendations. Third bullet point here is involve planning staff. A lot of the review strategies that we talk about involve inviting your planning staff, your building officials to educate members on the process. And this fourth bullet point here, this fourth and fifth ones, just another tip just as we start out, is I think it'd be a good idea to form some subcommittees. Now that this is an annual requirement, not a requirement every 3 years, I think we can start to see some boredom creep up if we're just sort of checking the box each and every year when we talk about these same incentives over and over again. So in order to really get deep on some of these incentives, let's say you have 10 members on your committee. You can have some subcommittees. You could point to 2 folks and say, hey, you two, you're going to just learn about ADUs for the next month. You're going to come back in a month and share with us what you've learned and what your recommendations are. You two, you're going to talk about expedited permitting, right? There's ways to break up this work, to form subcommittees, to generate interest moving forward, and not so it doesn't become stale and boring and just checking the box. Well, at least this next point here, which is it's okay to focus on just a few incentives each year. I think this is a very important bullet point, given that this is now annual requirement, and this work does take time to make some good recommendations on. AHAC statute only says you have to consider all 11. It does not say you have to have recommendations on all of the 11 each and every year. So it is very possible to say, like, look, in 2022, we're just going to focus on the density strategy. We're just going to focus on ADUs and expedited permitting. Write that in your report, really go deep into those 3, make a note in your report to say, hey, we consider these other 8 or other 7, but we're really not going to dive deep on them until 2023 or 2024. It's okay, you can do that. I think that's a good strategy, given that we do have limited meetings, folks are volunteers, you really want to get down to the weeds about how to make these strategies work.
Hey, Cody.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, on this very slide that you're talking on right now, we've got a question here that might be relevant to talk about. How can we form a subcommittee without violating the sunshine law prohibition?
What a great, wonderful question. So yeah, I guess I should have gone more in depth on that. So when I think about subcommittees, I think more of like just giving like homework assignments, right? You could like have like 2 people assign homework of like, hey, you two on your own time the next month, really read through the ADU code, read through these like best practice guidebooks that are out there, and then you individually come back and educate the rest of the committee on what you've learned. Because yeah, I agree with you. If you have 2 members of a subcommittee on the AHAC, they can't meet individually. That violates sunshine. So you can have like subcommittees as like a homework assignment, if you will. If you want to like really get into all of these incentives deeply, you can assign certain folks to learn about it on their own time.
All right.
Again, so that's first. Those are the first tips I had, and the other one was before I move on a little bit, was just encourage creativity. AHACs are made of human beings, and we all have different personalities on these committees, right? You might have some folks that are outspoken, some folks that might take over the meeting, some folks that don't speak at all. I think good AHAC committees, really encourage participation, encourage creativity, get all voices heard. I think that overall just makes a better product at the end of the day. I think what's so exciting for me personally at being able to train on this at a statewide level, but also makes it challenging, is that there's a lot of push and pull of these strategies. And what I mean by that is, every local government, every AHAC, every elected official, every city or county commission are going to have their own mindset, their own philosophy about like the role of zoning regulations and regulations in general and what they can do and what they can't do. And so really the push and pull for a lot of these strategies that are very much zoning regulation based is going to be a push and pull, right? You're going to have some people in your AHACs and some commissioners and some cities or counties in general that will be thinking that if you just remove or loosen zoning regulations across the board, you're going to get affordable housing. Like the more of like the free market side, if we just remove zoning regs, the free market will end up building affordable housing. That's one side. Then you have another push and pull of this, which is, there are some AHACs, some people who are on the side of, well, if you want, deed restricted affordable housing to be built, you have to require it. You have to condition your density bonuses, all these incentives on actually getting deed restricted housing. This is sort of the push and pull for all of these. I think every AHAC, every commission is going to be different in how they approach this. I think the answer is always somewhere in the middle, right? I do absolutely think we need to loosen some of these regs to just build more supply overall. And when you're giving away really valuable incentives, we'll talk about what some of those are today, that, yeah, I think you absolutely can condition some of those on getting deed restricted housing. But again, I think this will be the push and pull for a lot of this if you think by right changes will result in housing, or if you have to actually require it to get affordable housing units built.
Okay, we're gonna stop it right there because it can get a little long, but what the objective was for you all to be refreshed on what AHAC members.
I will be talking about this.
What your roles are and what the expectation for you all in coming together to come up with incentives and strategy and recommendation for the city to vote on. So there was some other two items that we wanted to, but it's gonna be a little longer. So what I'm gonna do is I'll send that email out with the video so you all can watch at your own time, the rest parts of it. And what he does, he's gonna go into several of those strategies and incentives that we have to, that you all have to talk about and make some decisions on. And what he does is gives examples of how to go about making those decisions, presenting them towards the city. And the one that I did highlight was a reservation of infrastructure capacity. If you look in your packet, I did put in the report from the end of last year, and we did get our funding. So we're not one of those ones that has to wait because they didn't get their report. We did, we got our funding, and this is the report that I submitted. And what I did from this report is pull from here things that we had not addressed. And so the two bullet points that I had that I thought we were going to be able to review, those were, he talked about those two things. So that video, when I send it out to you, you'll be able to just click over to those two things and look at it and see. And he would give some examples on about how to implement it or make recommendation for us if that's what you guys would like to do. So, right, so is there any questions?
You mentioned the second presentation on Friday. Will you be sending us?
I will go in there and see and send it. Yes, I will look for that and send that as well. So anything that's related to the AHAC, I will email it out to everyone so they can review it at least. Because I think, he had some key points in about forming a subcommittee, identifying 2 or 3 things that we want to focus on, and let's just work on that. Instead of all 11 we don't have to do. And based on our reporting, the city has done a great job with already implementing some of these strategies in some fashion anyway. So, and we have to do this every year. But there is talk that they're thinking about wanting to make a change about this meeting yearly report because agencies are seeing this as it's not being productive because you're meeting once a year, you're putting these reports together, but there's no progress because you're not having enough time to see the changes. So the state, hopefully the state may be making some changes to that.
But like, the incentives that he's talking about and the changes and stuff is pretty much what we put forward in the report last year. So, and then that's the same incentives that I've seen come down from the state, that they're doing, you know, the accessory homes, and they're doing this. And it kind of mirrors what we presented. And then I understand that we get more SHIP money this year.
Yes. Yes, we are getting, a good bit of SHIP money, projected, 800 and some thousand. That's gonna be possibly coming our way to do more affordable housing.
And also, we're getting more money into the affordable housing too, besides the SHIP, right? That's coming from the legislative in Tallahassee.
Yes. Yes, we have, additional funding that's coming in, but remember, it's for our low income, extremely low income, you know, that is our target, and we're trying to service those individuals with what we have.
Right. But with the SHIP, that helps the elderly, right? And rehab on their house, and like the wheelchair ramps, and if they need like a roof or whatever, that comes out of the SHIP, right?
Yes, we have several strategies that we're working on. Well, that's in the LHAP itself. What we're trying to do now, because for the last couple of years, it's just been sort of one thing after the next as far as you're dealing with COVID, then we started dealing with the hurricane relief, and so we haven't been able to really push forward and get through our rehab list the way that we wanted to. We've been focused on the roofs. We've been getting through those, but that was with the COVID money. So now what we're doing is we've been meeting quite a bit, putting a plan in place to now start going back through, because we have a very long list of rehab clients. So we're starting to go through that list. Bill is actually leading that charge. We're going through that list and vetting those people, trying to make sure they still qualify based on the guidelines, so on and so forth, trying to reduce the ones that we can take off, we take them off if they've already had the work done, so on and so forth. So the goal now is to really start pulling from that rehab list and start getting some projects, rehab projects done. And getting in the community and letting the people know, hey, the money is available, and trying to keep them getting on the list, and we keep pulling as much as we can, because we have to, of course, meet our set-asides for each individual category as well. So between that and DPA, that's the target right now for the funds to be able to reach our set-asides.
Yeah, so and then we should be able to do a lot more, because in the past, we've got SHIP funds like 74,000,
Right.
82,000, 57,000, and now we're 800.
Now we're 800, yeah.
So we ought to be able to rock and roll some of those.
Yeah. And it's just a matter of just getting the program just, kick-started, jump-started again, because there's been such a focus on, we've spent the last, since September, working on hurricane relief. So we're moving forward now.
Thank you.
And just FYI, the projection for 23-24 is 889,693. Of course, by the time, it comes down, it's probably gonna be a little different. It always is. But we also got an additional 201,000 for hurricane recovery. Initially, we were taking money from our regular allocation of SHIP to help with hurricane relief. Well, when they came and they actually decided that they would be able to give us funding aside from our regular allocation, now we don't have to actually use the allocation that was set aside. Maybe, but that's the hope, that we can put that back and do the regular programs with that, and then use what was given to us from Florida Housing for the hurricane relief.
I saw those figures, and it was good news.
Yes, very good news.
One thing that I might suggest is we have a 90-page new law that they just passed regarding affordable housing and housing opportunities, and it's a little bit to wade through, but it might be a good suggestion to at least take a look at it, and see if you can get a summary. Our summaries out there. But take a look at that before our next meeting. And I can also share with you that the Volusia AHAC has added an item L, which has to do with construction and density.
But what comes from the state, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, but because it allows like this paper that we send the city commissioner, and the city commission, they okayed it. So then we've got a little latitude to change from what actually comes from Tallahassee, because it says that it's a local issue. And so that's just, the Tallahassee is the guideline, but we've got latitude to go outside of those guidelines, I think, according to, it's a local issue, and it's a zoning issue, and it's if the commission approves it, the planning board approves it, and all that stuff.
Yes.
So,
I took it from the video that he was encouraging us to be creative and go outside of the 11 items.
right.
And I think we did a good job of addressing most of those last year, so I think this year we can get some new ideas and creative things going.
We might come back at the next meeting with a suggestion as to which items we want to target specifically. And then that would help with encouraging or inviting speakers on those topics.
If we narrow down what we want to focus on what you guys want to focus on as a committee, then yes, we can actually target those specific things and get people in that can help steer us in the right direction.
When you chose reservation of infrastructure and transit-oriented mixed use, were those two items we kind of left unfinished last year? So those are good starting points.
Yeah, that was K on in the reporting, is that attachment that you all have. So that's why we said we'll go back later to those two other ones that were identified.
And the infrastructure is a real hard one to deal with, because, that's roads and that's sewer and that's water, and I don't know how we can have any control over that. We can tell the city that we want, water, sewer, and roads. The city tells us to go pound sand.
I think what we may be able to do is things that are already in place that people may not know about. I think it may be important for us to get people in from the departments that can come in and share with the board, this is what's on the table, this is what we're doing now. Because a lot of times, if we're moving in the dark, because a lot of times we don't really know what's going on. But I think it's important for the board to be informed, and we can get, representation from the other departments to let us know, hey, this is what we're doing, this is on the table, and then that gives us, a little bit of peace as to what's going forward, and if you want to suggest anything else to add with it.
Statistics.
Sorry, Commissioner Mayher, when we're doing that request for the departments, can you hear me all right? When we're doing a request to the departments, could we ask them what percentage we've accomplished, not just have we done it, but to what extent? I'm curious about the accessory dwelling units. How many people have actually taken advantage of that opportunity? I'm curious about it. Thank you.
One of the things that I read recently was that the average American uses 100 to 150 gallons of water every day, which means that we also have 100 to 150 gallons of wastewater to dispose of every day. So with our flooding issues and other issues, that's a concern that a lot of our citizens have as to where's the water going to come from. Do we have to address that before we approve new housing or new construction? And where's all that water going to go to afterwards?
With any new subdivision that goes in, or any new planned unit development, or whatever you call it, the city has to do a study. And they say that, that the infrastructure is there, that the water's there, and there's adequate, sewage and stuff before it can even be brought to, like, the city commission or the planning thing. city just recently, in my knowledge, is the first subdivision that's been turned down, the one that was south of the flea market, and it was because of infrastructure.
That might be a speaker that we would be interested in.
Someone from water, is that what you're saying? From the water department?
As far as infrastructure, yeah,
Okay.
the water department might be a topic.
Well, my recollection is that the reservation of infrastructure is actually asking them to set aside a certain amount of the infrastructure capacity to be used toward affordable housing. Are we doing that in any way, shape, or form right now? Okay.
We'll have to get down and answer to that for you.
I have another question. Meeting with one of my neighbors, I live out near the growth area of I-95 and LPGA, and they're not on board with our affordable housing, and they said, did you know that 30% of all these new apartments will be occupied by people on affordable housing programs? And I told her she was completely backwards, and that to my knowledge, none of that new growth out there is being using affordable housing incentives. Is that correct?
And why is NIMBY okay?
It's all,
Why is NIMBY okay for that? Not in my backyard,
Backyard, yeah.
okay?
Well,
We want to have it, but you don't want it over there in your area.
There is one
There
that's,
is one.
well, I think that's up to the developer to, if it's market rate.
it is, and whether they want
And the
to pass
developer
incentives
decides, yes, what the
to
project is
to
built.
them, it's not worth it, but
Right.
With the new law, though, some of that affordable housing can go into different areas. So it's
It can, but the developer has to agree to it,
yes.
you know, to be able to do the project. He makes the final decision, unless it's a government entity, you know, then they make the decision. But if it's just a regular contractor, investor guy, he decides if he wants it to be all market rate or if he wants it to be affordable. And then that's like the incentive in here that said that the city could waive some fees, they could do this, they could do that, if the developer, you know, had some affordable housing in his project. And then that's when it comes back to the developer to decide if that's a worthy project that he wants to do for the incentives, or he doesn't want the incentives and he'll just go ahead with the market rate.
We're open for public comment.
Yes.
Yeah, we set aside 288 housing for affordable housing on 5 Morris. It's already been passed. The developer is going to build. The county and the city has both contributed funds, so it will be affordable housing in perpetuity. Secondly, the county at the last meeting set aside land west of 95 that they own for affordable housing. So it's coming down the pipe. And there's also a senior housing unit going in off of Vine Street with 88 units. So we're
Which
well
street is
above
that?
what we need.
Fine.
Vine. We're like 400 and some odd affordable housing units at this point.
So how much is being set aside for moderate income, or are you not putting anything into the money that came down? It's coming down. So you got low income, you got low and very low, and you got moderate. And moderate very seldom gets funded. Is there anything coming in, and this new money coming in that you're getting now, that would be fiscal year starting July 1, correct? Because it always ends on June 30th, and that is July 1 when the new funds come in. Are you laying?
Well, with the moderate, like, is that how we assist homeowners that are moderate? There's a certain percentage that we can only do for moderate income with this SHIP funding. So that is always taken into consideration. So the funding that we've gotten in the past, which has not been a lot of money, they may have been able to do one. And then new money, we've only been able to do maybe 2. So we're still not gonna be able to do a large number of moderate because of the stipulation that SHIP puts in place that we can only assist a certain percentage of moderate income households. So a lot of our funding is gonna be for the low income and the extremely low income.
And how much home money did you get this year? Because home and SHIP together makes the down payment assistance program work.
Well, home, we can't use home for moderate.
But I mean, did any home money, will any, because that money
Yes.
starts as of October first.
Yes.
That'll fiscal year September 30th, and then it'll go October 1. And you take the two
Right.
things and bring them together.
We did get home money. I can't say off the top of my head what that amount was, but the next meeting I can get you that amount of what it was.
Okay, and my next
I think
question
it was
for
40,
you is
44, I believe. 444. 484.
484. 484,000?
Mhm.
Okay, so you got a nice chunk from the two that are gonna come in. What has to be done for, if you're having some permitting waived, that type of thing for a new builders, new construction, and it's for affordable housing? What is the procedure for them? Do they go upstairs to you and get a form filled out and then go to permits and licensing?
If we're doing, yes.
But, I mean, if they're coming in as, so what do they do? First of all, that builder as a qualified party to be, I'm building in the affordable housing arena, and is it a specific area in the city you want, or as long as it's in the city of Daytona Beach, and they are building for the purpose of affordable housing, then do they get a form and get it filled out? Because when they go down to permits and licensing, they'll tell them, you need to go up to get whatever. And it's, impact fees on that list, anything coming off of impact fees.
I would have to, Yolanda and I would have to look into that, but as far as where they would need to come, they would need to come and see Ken. And Ken would
Ken
sign
would
off,
go
Ken
through the
Thomas,
procedure,
yes, Ken Thomas,
process
yes.
them, and
we
then
would
get
do
that,
the,
that downstairs, okay.
He would do what he needs to do and get it taken care of.
And then it would go
So
to the
do
planning.
you have an amount
Yes.
on your, because there's two different little animals floating around out here for affordable housing. You've got your amount set, and then there's the real world, out in the real world of real estate, as to what is conceived as affordable housing. So what is your amount that builder would need to adhere to? Because you may say, 200,000, which is totally unrealistic anyway, they can't build for 200,000. So what is the amount? Because the real amount out here in the world that we live in as realtors, there's a different amount for affordable housing. What's the amount the city has?
Right now, we're adjusting we're working on adjusting the price, the amount that was set forth, last year. We're actually working on that now and doing our due diligence to be able to come up with the number. We're very much aware that it's a totally different, world out there in the real estate world.
And are you basing yours on the number of bedrooms and say a 4-bedroom, 2-bath is an amount, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, builder does a 3-2, it's an amount that is gonna be stagnant on your,
Our number is gonna be a set number.
for
Just
whole, no matter what.
regardless.
4-bedroom, 3-bedroom,
Regardless, it'll be a
whatever you
set
can,
number
whatever they say they can build on that plot.
for that amount,
But
exactly.
remember, right now, I think we're at, what, 225?
I think the original-
225 for what?
251.
251.
251.
I know.
251. But understanding the target, the individuals that we are assisting, the homeowners, the low and the very low, that's, they're not gonna exceed that amount anyway, because remember, it's based on the income.
And like in the real
They're
world,
gonna approve them.
they're not gonna be able to afford what you're saying is in the real world.
Right.
So,
Okay, so some folks, there's gonna be a different discussion for that, and I'll leave it alone, because some folks, even though they're in that low-income arena, they also, over the years, have carried a 401k or something else that can help them, tap into, but they are still in a low-income guideline. You've got.
Well, remember that all that income has to be counted, so that 401k money will have to be counted.
That'll knock them out then.
Yes.
it's considered assets, so that it's a whole calculation that we have to do to determine what the actual number is.
So right now, you thought that, but a builder, so it's at 250 something, that would be realistic then, right? Because a builder can't even, tap, for 225 and get in, you think, but it depends on, I guess, the cost of a lot then, pretty much. Yeah.
One of the questions that has come up to me was, does a builder of scattered properties have to do a TRT, or are they just to do individual permit?
Well, I have to get the answer for you for that one. So the question is, a builder that's building on scattered lots, if they need to go through TRT.
Right, as opposed to a development.
Correct.
You saying per house? Per
Yeah.
house, if it's a scattered
If
area?
it's scattered,
And if it's one on Division Street, one on Mary Street, one on Cedar Street, same floor plan, but does each one have to go through a TRT process? Is that
Individually,
individually?
as a package.
And so, one other question, where is the city on, so small footprint homes that's out in the air? And, I am one of the people responsible for the development of, small footprint homes. And is it LHAP plan to be changed, or to add into, or to make a recommendation into, to get the correct, wording, to make sure zoning is covering the size of a lot and the size of a home?
Commissioner May, would you like to speak to that?
We're actually working on that right now, and I keep bringing up the idea of let's go smaller, but that takes a complete commission vote on that one.
Okay.
But it is being worked, and also at the last meeting, the mayor went ahead and discussed the modular homes. He discussed the modular homes, and he seemed to be enjoying the idea of moving forward, and made a recommendation that staff look into it further.
And so this Saturday at the housing fair, in addition to the small footprint homes, we now have a container home coming over, to be on premises for the housing fair. And, would we be taking that through a certain permit process and all of that also? And those are extremely affordable, but that's gonna take, make sure that the city officials are on board that a container home would be of, the one that's coming over is 320 square feet, but it is totally done just like walking into a room like this, floors, bed, everything, kitchens, everything's there.
ADA accessible.
And ADA accessible. But it's a good consideration for, transient people that are, or for anyone basically, because they're stackable and they are like, they go attached, whatever, but anyone, but it is, the price of one is very affordable.
It's now 5:00.
The last thing before we leave here, we know we have our next meeting on,
February
June.
22nd.
So would you all like to,
June 21st.
change the schedule up a little bit and meet next month, or how would you?
I didn't hear that.
I said June is fine with me, but next month would be good as well. Next month might be better than going into your vacation month.
Shall we have a roll call?
Do we need to meet next month, or?
I don't think we have any pressing issues that would need
So
a
you.
meeting next month. I'm fine with June.
I'm fine with June.
June's good.
I'll have to zoom in.
Okay.
I won't be on the other side.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Well, there's a majority,
June.
for June, so.
I'm sorry, what was the date on that?
June 21st.
It is the 3rd. Is it, which the Wednesday is it?
Wednesday, June 21st at 4.
I get it. Which one of the week? Is it the first, second, third, fourth, fifth Wednesday? Which is it?
Fourth Wednesday.
Fourth Wednesday.
Fourth Wednesday, okay. I may have to zoom in. All right, thank you.
If there is no other business, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you.